my initial hit on masculine and feminine, or when it became real for me, was when I was looking at my marriage and the dynamics there once I essentially decided to leave it. And I realized how I was in burnout and how I was so in my masculine when there was a deep, deep desire to be in my feminine, especially because when it comes to more traditional wife, female home duties, doing laundry, cooking, those are things that I actually really enjoy. But when I'm also managing the finances, when I'm also working outside of the home full time, when I'm carrying the mental load of the meal planning, of the shopping, of the groceries, like cooking and cleaning and laundry are not enjoyable whatsoever because there doesn't seem to be like any time for it. And there's also just like, this is expected to do it all for myself. Like that was an expectation I had of myself. I should be able to do it all.
Yeah. And I think you and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about maybe some of the Southern values, which were different as far as the expectations of husband and wife duties that you stepped into in your first marriage, which was similar to what I expected based off of my upbringing of what I would look like in my first marriage. And I think we had a lot of that in common as far as the expectation of what it is that the woman carries.
Yeah.
Something as simple as, who's responsible for buying Christmas presents for the entire family, the cousins, the grandma, the aunt, the uncle, or who's responsible for reminding the husband to wish his mother a birthday and
sending a birthday card, sending a birthday text,
and just pretending like it's him, but you're actually sort of the puppeteer behind the scenes. And we had a lot in common around that experience, and you didn't recognize going into that, just what you shared, that was the expectation when you stepped into that family.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it is kind of the trad wife, maybe what I would consider the trad wife, one of the duties.
Well, define trad wife, because not everyone would. What does that stand for? Like, not everyone's going to know what that is.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really gotten into understanding.
So it's traditional trad stands for traditional wife.
Yeah, so it would be a female who has children, who stays at home, doesn't necessarily work outside of the house. And my understanding of what's like imposed on social media is like the enjoyment of this traditional stay-at-home mom experience where you're fully involved in your child's life, activities, hobbies, you're doing arts and crafts with them, you're fully involved in like the home space and even like hosting and holidays and then meals, cooking, and
being from my Southern perspective, being a trad wife means being in service, really.
Yeah.
And subservient to the husband.
Yeah.
There is a dominant and a submissive, in my view of what a trad wife would be traditionally.
So in my own experience, I can remember getting ready to get married and going through the whole like bride process, and there was this experience of preparing for my wedding and taking really good care of myself and getting facials and all this stuff and feeling guilty over it. And I honestly thought like, okay, when I get married and I'm a married woman, it's my role to be selfless.
Yes.
So I'm going to step into this role. I'm going to always put my husband before me and my child and whatever needs to be done in the family dynamic and the marriage. And like, isn't that such a beautiful thing?
Yeah. Self-sacrificing.
To be selfless, to not have to, have so much care and concern over myself. This is my opportunity to like serve others. And in that process, in that line of thinking, completely lost myself.
100%.
Well, service without reciprocation is martyrdom in a sense, right?
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Like, from my perspective, that's beautiful if someone else is also in equal service in a complementary way. That's what makes that work. And so is that not the experience the two of you have had?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't fault my ex-husband. He's super caring, very compassionate. But I think what that brings up for me is that it's this martyrdom, this victimhood of women is so common.
Yeah.
And I think that calls to bring in like the masculine experience and maybe even the traditional masculine. Like, why are women kind of felt like it's our role to be selfless? And I guess I could argue what I hear from men is there is a lot of feeling like, well, what about me? I self-sacrifice for the family. You know, I'm working my ass off and I'm the last one to be recognized or appreciated or seen. I think that's common, you know, that traditional masculine wound is what is it?
You don't see
it's never
what
enough.
I'm doing.
It's never enough.
Not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. A man in his full power, I think, wants to be in silent service. So it should feel like in his full power, he wants to be able to do something and show up in the world in general and for his family and for his wife in a way that goes, here I am. I don't need any acknowledgement, reciprocation, and reward. But the truth of the matter is that traditional way of being is also not really fulfilling for a man, because of course you need some sense of acknowledgement, reciprocation,
Validation.
and validation. It's just a natural thing. It takes a very, very strong, centered, purposeful man to really, without wounds and all that stuff, which is impossible. Everyone has those, to show up in a relationship like that and be able to hold that standard. So yes, I do think men also have, you know, a gripe here. I think maybe the difference though is the traditional man has one avenue usually to pursue, his work, right? Like he goes out and I do my work and I've got one thing. My sense of the traditional woman, having worked with women my whole career, is that they have 100 things that they're tracking. And that is a big difference between men and women. Men are like, I'm tracking one thing, my work, I make money, I go to my 9 to 5. It's pretty linear, clear. Whereas women are like, well, I've got 100 things and other things added constantly.
Yeah. And I think the women want to be seen in that. And that can build a lot of times resentment in the relationship dynamic, because she may, maybe when they're fresh and it's the beginning, she's super appreciative. You're doing this one thing, you're providing for us in this one way. And over the years, as kids come along, whatever, there's a huge list of things that she's tracking. And it's like, hey, wait, look at me. Do you see what I'm doing? And both people really wanting appreciation and validation and to be seen for what they're contributing.
But in very different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, in very different ways. And what I would say, and with the masculine feminine thing, which is fine, but I would just say what we're talking about right now is a very human thing. Humans come before genders, and the very human thing is to be acknowledged, to be seen for what we are doing, and to have some empathy and compassion for what we're doing. And when you could do that to a male or a female, forget masculine feminine dynamics, when you could show up and say, A, I see you. B, you know, I could see how hard it is, and I so appreciate you and thank you for who you are being in the world. That is like an Energizer bunny for relationships. It's just like, okay, I'm seen, I'm understood. You know, I will now put the pedal to the metal. And I think what happens is we get in these dynamics where it's like, no, you need to do more, or you're not doing enough, or you're too much, or, you know, there's something wrong. When you're just like, can we start with the fact that I'm doing a lot first? And then if you have some feedback for me, then I'm open to that. But you need to acknowledge how it is I'm being in the world.
The experience of being married definitely taught me that on a human level, we all want to be seen and accepted for exactly who we are.
Yeah, seen, valued, and heard. For me, in my first marriage, we were just so young and we didn't know what we were doing. And this understanding of what you're talking about, Jade, of which we talked about yesterday a little bit, the answer to all human relating is in 100% seeing, listening, not judging based off of what's being shared, especially if it's an emotional thing on the surface, seeing past what's on the surface, seeing who they are, what their experience is, having compassion for it, having empathy for it, and really getting down to the heart of the matter and not defensiveness and combativeness and lifting the sword and always being in service to the coupleship.
Yeah. So I can see we can go, I'm kind of seeing two different pathways to continue with this. One is like the traditional masculine and feminine wounds and why that inhibits like conscious nonviolent communication around that.
Yeah.
Being seen, being heard. I definitely feel like,
which goes into the inner child.
Yeah. And then there's the whole dynamic of like a non-traditional relationship pattern and expanding out to, because, you know, we have this traditional framework of what's approved by society and who women should be in a marriage and who men should be in a marriage. But what happens when you kind of rebel against that? And, you know, I even experienced like, okay, well, I'm a little bit more masculine in this marriage than he is. So how am I going to try to reinvent the wheel here?
Yeah, which is exactly what I did in my second marriage.
Successful dynamic, like make this work for me.
Yeah.
Which opens the door to like all kinds of
alternative relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which way do we want to go?
Well, man, I don't know which direction, but maybe this will help you decide. To me, I think that what you two have perhaps dealt with in the men in your life is a significant amount of men who were raised by only women in the generation that came up in your generation, or mostly women, which speaks to lack of a, you know, dominant, healthy male figure. Yeah. On top of that, these men are getting cultural feedback that power is more important or popularity is more important than purpose. Mm-hmm. And so I think that presents a situation where men are not in their masculine fully, and they also are not fully authentic and chasing things that aren't unique to them, which leaves you all, women, I think, in the unique position to be like, okay, now I have to step up into my masculine, and I don't know how to get him anchored and focused on the work that, you know, he doesn't know needs to be done, and I shouldn't be the one to tell him. And then this dynamic, you know, sort of begins to happen that I see that happens with women a lot. So I think, yeah.
What an interesting thing. And I've never thought about that. I've thought about the pattern of the men that I've had in my life have typically an abandonment wound. Some have had fathers, some have had mothers, but I never thought about the fact that I tend to be a person who shows up, can easily show up masculine or feminine. I can do both, but in relationship dynamics with men, I can very strongly be masculine if I feel the masculine isn't stepping up with their masculine. So
because you had a strong male role model,
this is exactly where I'm going. Because my father was such a strong, maybe too much dominant masculine dynamic in my household, it trained me in my masculine in a way that has been really hard, or I've been avoidant of it, to find a masculine partner who had the same level of masculinity modeled to them. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up being that stepping into that role.
And you're also, I would say, you know, and you could push back on this, but I would say that's your comfort zone. The reason it's your comfort zone because you were, that's the sort of the upbringing you had, and it might be uncomfortable for you.
It's also my discomfort zone.
Yeah.
It's both, and that's where the confusion comes into play.
Yes. Yeah. Strong suit. It's both a strong suit and a racket, right?
And there's a wounding there too. There's
100%.
Wounds.
Yeah, because I've tried both. I've tried male partners who had a missing father figure and a strong, dominant female mother. And I've had a male partner whose mother was missing, but the father was not a strong masculine role. And so that hasn't really worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your experience with the dynamic in your family? I'm curious.
I had a very strong, solid dad.
Yeah.
I had an emotionally volatile, unstable, I would say, mother at the time, because she had a mother wound, and these things go in generations. She had a mother wound that was passed down to her. And so I would say if I have a wound, it's a mother wound. My father was very solid. But the way, and you know, you all can push back on this too if you want, but the textbook way of thinking about this would be that from the mother perspective, right, they're the one who is usually providing unconditional love, nurturing and nourishing. The father is the one that's like pushing you, go out there and do it, and being kind of hard on you. And so if I had it was the unconditional love piece, perhaps that was a little bit missing for me, was the father being like, you can do anything you want to do. And so I think that shows up, sort of in how I am in my life.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. How did that impact your first marriage? Well, your marriage that you had, and then how does that impact your female partners that you select now?
Yeah, it impacted my first marriage, because think about it, right? If you have a emotionally volatile mother she did give love, but she was emotionally volatile.
But you're going to probably try to heal her?
Yeah, I'm going to try to be a good boy, and I'm also not going to trust her emotions. So every relationship after that, I was a good boy, people pleaser, asked for nothing for myself, showed up, did all the things, right? Like, it was just like, solid. I'll make the plans. I'll take care of you. It's all about you. It's all about your dreams. I got you, babe. All of that.
Right.
And then nothing for myself. No need for acknowledgement, reciprocation, or reward. Like, I just got it, just stoic, moving forward. I got you, babe. I got you, babe. I got you, babe. Because that's like my dad.
Yeah.
But never learning to ask for anything for myself. So what happens? Bitterness creeps in, kind of feeling like I'm not understood. I'm misunderstood. I got no one that has my back.
Yeah.
And I can't trust you. You're always hijacking the room with your emotions. I never get to express myself.
Yeah.
And then that leads to going and looking for that. When you feel a hole there, you go and try to fill that hole, whether consciously or unconsciously.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
And I'm curious, how did you see your father cope with it?
My father was just super solid.
Yeah.
But I would say, yes, didn't ask for much for himself. Would just
maybe
be
like shut down a little bit more.
Yeah, I would just say, just went to work. I'll give you an example. My mom would frequently say to me, I'm leaving, to the whole family. That's it. I'm gone. Shut the door and run. And the first time that happened to me, I was on my way to football practice, and my mom freaked out, slammed the door, got in her car, and went. And I was terrified.
Yeah.
And my dad looked at me and said, Jade, go get your pads. We got to get you to practice.
Yeah.
So we get to practice, and I want to cry, right? I want to freak out. And instead, I'm like looking around, and I'm like, what are you going to do? I'm in fight or flight mode. So I can fight, or I could flee, or I could hide. I want to hide and cry. I want someone to hold me, but I'm in the perfect situation because I'm at a football practice.
Yeah.
And so I hit those kids as hard as I possibly could, and I got rewarded for it. Right. And then that followed me through my life. That's the first little story I wrote. And so I'm not sure that was my dad in hindsight now would have been like, your mom's having a tough time. I love you. We're going to be okay. And there might've been something else to be said there, but I would say that was a wound. And these wounds they're subtle, but powerful.
Very much so. Absolutely. And help write our stories.
And how do you feel like your childhood dynamic impacted your selection of male partners? Or how you feel like you should show up as a wife or a female partner?
Yeah, that's a tricky one for me. I think there's definitely still some exploring. I mean, my father is a very disciplined, by the book kind of dude, but then he really excelled athletically, got a full ride to college, but he grew up in a dysfunctional home where he was always playing mediator between his father and his brother and his mom. And so he actually ended up going into social work and kind of, he grew up in Manhattan in a really successful family and totally rebelled against making money or wanting any part of that, and went into social work and working in Newark, New Jersey, and just dedicated his whole career to that. But I think the shadow side of always being the peacemaker led to opening the door for addiction patterning. However, because of his athleticism and discipline, he always had a very hard line with it. So every single night, even driving home from work, he has a beer, at least one beer. I've never seen my father. One time in my life, I've seen my father intoxicated, but beer, smoking weed constantly. And even he had a bout with cigarettes. So addiction, definitely, I think I really look to my father as to why I'm so drawn to addicts, and all my adult relationships have been with addicts or alcoholics. So I had one brother, and he's older. And I feel very similar to my father in personality and character, where I see my brother a little bit more similar to my mother. So I've always had this like affinity for my dad and understanding of him on a deeper level. And as a female, I can inquire with him on a deeper emotional level, especially as an adult now, about his childhood, about his father committing suicide, about, the dynamic of what it was like in his home. So I like, you know, I know I have this like superpower almost with my dad as a female. And I think that's kind of taken me into this addiction of my own of like, maybe I can help, get in there and help fix you too.
Well, define that a little more fully. So just in case anyone doesn't know, you tend to attract
Addicts and alcoholics.
Yeah. So those tend to be the people you date.
Yeah. So all of my long-term relationships, pretty much in my since I was 18, have been with addicts and alcoholics. And I think I attribute, there's also this like awareness or acceptance around partying. That was such a big part of like the culture I grew up in. My parents were hippies and we always had big backyard parties with live bands. And, that was just a part of our culture. My parents' friends were my aunts and uncles, musicians, artists, really cool people. And I grew up seeing drinking and partying all the time. So when I got around that as an adult, I couldn't tell, I didn't have the, I guess, awareness that there were problems until I was like too deep in it because I just saw it all the time. And I had a dad who had such a hard line. It never interfered with his career, his daily life. So I never really saw the dark side of addiction until I was in a relationship with someone.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? We go to what's familiar.
Yeah.
And we figure out whether it's helpful or not.
Yeah.
I'm curious for you. Like, so would you say similar? You both had strong fathers.
Yeah, very traditional household dynamic. My parents ran a business together, which was something I tried to repeat in my first marriage. My dad was very much dominant. My mother was very submissive. My dad had a lot to say. My mother had almost nothing to say. I grew up with a rhetoric that was peddled by my father, which was Kelly, which was confusing for me. Never put yourself in a circumstance where you're dependent on a man. So, but yet I was shown this very traditional dynamic with my dad had what he said was final. It was the last thing. And my mother literally had no voice. So that's been a really interesting thing for me to try to reconcile in my adult life and my adult relationships. In my first marriage, I essentially married my father, my first husband, and my dad did not get along because they were so similar. And they could never accept that about one another. And then I feel like in my second marriage, I married my mother. So I married the shadow side of both of my parents. And I have almost put on, at the beginning of my first marriage, I really stepped into the role of my mother. I was very traditional, very much in service, much putting his career and his needs first and mine second. Loved doing the laundry and cooking and being in service to him. But then as we were young, once I started growing up, learning a little bit more about myself, falling in love with myself in a deeper way, I started wanting to have something to say. And that started creating some interesting dynamics between the two of us. And then in my second relationship, I tried to fully remain autonomous and dominant and independent and not even commingle some of these aspects of self in the relationship. So I kind of remained more in some areas I remained in my masculine, but all of them. Because I felt like the energy from my husband is very much the same wounding that my mother had.
Yeah. And I think it's significant that you also lost your father at the time of your new marriage starting.
Yeah. I lost a lot right before the new marriage. My first husband died by suicide. So I met my second husband in the first year after that death. So that severely impacted him. Like, okay, well, this didn't work. I never want that to happen again. I never want to be abandoned in this way. Let me swing to the complete other end of things and try this on for size and see if this works. And it didn't. So it's really, my life's work and all the lessons that I've learned have been around the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's in the gray. It's not in the black and the white.
Yeah. Speaking of the whole traditional, roles thing, it's really interesting how your story tracks with the cultural story.
Yeah.
Right. Like you started on the traditional path. You were like, I don't know about that. You corrected and the pendulum swung over to the other side.
And I think like those mixed signals that I got from my dad, which was like, always have an education, always have a career, never get stuck in marriage because you're dependent on a man, but also this is how a woman should be. And this is how a woman should be taken care of. So it was very confusing. So as things evolved in culture, it's like could swing to, okay, well, there was this belief, let me try this. And there was this, let me try this.
Yeah. And if I may, and just see what you all think of this, because from my perspective, I go, this is exactly what we need as individuals and exactly tracks with culture. In other words, we first go, okay, how am I supposed to be in the world? Right. Mm-hmm. And so we try on these roles and then we try on these other roles and we make mistakes and we get beat down and we figure things out. And then eventually we get to a place where we go, wait a second. Like, I'm just going to define based on my lessons and my understanding and my knowledge. I'm going to trust my authentic nature. I'm going to step into this way. Mm-hmm. And that does take, trying on different things in life. And I do think the end of this thing is it's not the new way of doing it. It's not the traditional way of doing it. It's the way that you'll do it, your authentic self. And I do think like the whole abode sort of brand from my perspective and the Next Level Human brand is kind of about this, like finding a home within yourself, an authentic place to anchor that is not based off of what my father said or what my mother said or what my first lover had to say. Or it's really like, okay, I am now stepping into a choice point of maturity and I get to define which of these things I want. So to me, I'm like a traditional role. Perfect. If that's authentically you, I love that for you. Yeah. And if it's the alternative lifestyle, if that's authentically you, wonderful. But there's so many areas in between we can stake out. And I do think you two, as friends of mine, looking at the two of you, you are inspirational figures in this regard because you do own this, where you're just like, you know what, I'm just going to do it my way. And I'm going to teach people that way of finding that home within themselves. And I think that's the most powerful thing that we could do, but it does take growing up and it takes some bumps and bruises.
Well, I think that's part of the healing journey is letting go of the societal things that we're taught, acknowledging what those inner child wounds are, acknowledging what it is that inner child was saying, and really coming home to the truth of who we are. And that it takes years to get to that place.
Yeah, it's certainly a process. And I feel like, listen, we're all learning through contrast. We have to experience what we don't want in order to know what we really do want.
Yeah.
Right. So I was 31 when I got married and 32 when I had my daughter. And I was really aware, like in my feminine, in my 20s, that there was like already this seed starting to sow of like, who are you going to marry? When are you going to do it?
Yeah.
And feeling the societal pressure. Yeah. And I consciously rejected all of that, moved away from my whole college experience all the way across the country. That's when I started my whole spiritual experience, path. But I was living with my brother and his wife at the time, who had a 3-year-old and another one on the way. So I got to experience like, oh, okay, this is what it's really like.
Yeah.
And I think even now as a woman, I think it's more common to talk to a female child, and maybe they're like, I don't know if I want to have a kid, or I don't know if I want to get married. But for me, it was like, I just always knew I was going to do that.
100%.
And it's an interesting waking up point when you kind of check those boxes in your life. And then you're like, holy shit, I'm 32. I've got all these things. What the fuck am I going to do now?
Yeah.
And like, is this everything that I expected it to be. This whole like expectation comes in. So yeah, to your point, we go right to like, okay, well, what is expected of me? What have I seen before? How have I seen this done before? And then we navigate and learn through contrast. And
we learn what's authentic to us.
yeah.
Really.
Yeah. And everyone's tripping and falling. And I feel like I'm only attracted to the people who are real and authentic and honest about that, because none of us know what, are doing it right. But yeah, a part of like finding that balance, I think, is the tripping and the falling and coming back to those anchors of, what we're really made of, who we really are, and what we're connected to.
Yeah, I do think I think the trick is culture drives us in the first part of our life. Like we're either in lockstep with what culture says, prom marriage kids, right? Like I call that the PMK. It's like culture says prom marriage kids, so you do prom marriage kids, or we are in direct opposition to it as rebellion, which means we're still being controlled by culture. So we're still one or the other culture is controlling us, and we mature when we finally go, wait, I am not going to be beholden to what culture says. I'm an authentic individual. I have a unique history. I'm a unique spiritual fingerprint. I have unique work that I can do in only the way that I can do it. I will embrace that now.
Exactly.
And that's when we finally grow up. But most people, I will say, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, they die at 80, never having gotten to that place.
Yeah.
And I do think culture now is at a place where we are stepping into a time and place in history where I think we are being demanded to take these steps. More and more people are feeling out of sorts by being in opposition to or in lockstep with culture. And so they're being called in to their authentic selves, which is why there's Abode, which is why there's Next Level Human, which is why there's different individuals, modeling this.
Yeah, I think we're praised by society for checking the boxes, right? But where I'm in my life right now is I'm in complete rebellion against what is typical or expected or accepted as a single mother. I don't want to be someone who's, struggling economically or, seen as like kind of less than because I don't have a male counterpart. And, I want to like totally rise above that. And it's interesting because I think there is in Asheville specifically a lot of single moms.
Yeah.
And there's this like victim story around it. And it's like a constant battle for me because like while I feel the hardship of it, it's like my only desire is to like rise above it. I mean, it's a part of my story and I'm proud of it. I mean, it's kind of. I mean, I proudly say I was raised by a single mother, but my dad was always in the picture. But I saw her career soar, her finances soar, like life only got better for her. And so that's the story that I'm interested in telling for myself now. But yeah, I'm constantly struggling with the balance of it. And how do I feed my soul? How do I feed my journey forward and expansion as a human while I'm, living within the circumstance that I've chosen for myself in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar to me and I don't necessarily like to call myself a single mother because my son's father is very much in the picture and I have 50% support. So we really are splitting co-parenting.
I was going to say, it's interesting that some people, it's actually a really kind of, I've heard people get super sensitive about that single parent thing.
Yeah.
Like if you don't, if you're not doing this completely by yourself, then you're not a single parent. Like,
yeah,
chill out.
I want to do that in respect of people who have the whole everything on their shoulders.
Yeah,
because I have this luxurious 2-2-3 schedule where I have 50% time to take care of me and dedicate 100% of that time to nourishing myself, and then I have the other 50% of taking care of my son. But I don't remember what you said that I was gonna dive into in my story.
Just like, I was saying there can be some kind of narrative around what it means to just being divorced and raising a child.
Oh, I mean, I guess that was my biggest rebellious thing, that choosing to leave my second marriage where we checked all the social boxes. On the surface, everything looked perfect and, it looked like a fairy tale experience. But I recognized in that journey that what was best for my son and what was best for me was for me to not be in that relationship anymore because I could not add to my soul fire. I could not find the inspiration and the creative force that is my greatest power as a human being in that relationship dynamic. And ultimately, also, my son needed that experience of me and not this experience of me kind of, if you use the example of a fire, I had no more flames and I felt like a fire that was completely going out and the embers were just barely hanging on.
Yeah.
Versus my son needs the full blazing fucking bonfire version of me.
Mhm.
And that was one of the greatest determining factors for me in choosing to leave that, which was 100% a rebellion of these social norms and standards and scary.
Can we dig into that a little bit more?
Yeah.
The part about the part about the fire being snuffed out. Like
Yeah.
what do you attribute that to? What is that? Was that trying to fit into traditional roles while, being the boss, sort of person in the room? Or like, I'm just very curious about that because I think like ultimately lots of people are feeling that, right? Like,
Yeah.
especially lots of mothers that I talked to in the work that I've done for 30 years, it's like they feel that and they hear that over and over again. Like, I just don't feel myself. I don't feel like I have anything for myself. I feel like my energy's gone. Like,
Well, I didn't feel, base level, I didn't feel seen, valued, and heard.
mm,
And then I felt like I was fighting and fighting to try to do our work for the both of us. And I was burning out as far as energetic output. All of my energetic output was going to that work and trying to help us and save us because I have an understanding of what my capacity is and what a relationship can look like. And yes, I have high standards and high expectations. There was no space left for me and my fire. I was not in a feeling supported and he was not feeling supported. We also had very much archetype friction in the way of astrology. It's just who we are and how our wounds are and how we triggered one another. It was, I would say it's still possible to make it technically work, these two energies, but it would be one of the highest forms of healing wounds. And each individual would have to have a very high capacity of energy to be able to put into that to heal those wounds. And we just couldn't meet in the middle as far as our capacity and the amount of energetic output it would take for us to heal these wounds.
And I feel like it circles back perfectly to the masculine and feminine and those core wounds because it's like there's no, when we're talking about it in the context of like a fire, like I think one of the most powerful roles of the masculine is to like provide, the shelter and blocking the wind. So, and I once heard this beautiful fable, I think it was from like Australia, of like a man just, climbing the mountain only to build a fire for the woman to like provide shelter and safety and warmth to her as she's on her journey. Like that was his soul mission.
Yeah.
And she's like on this whole, like, doesn't quite know where she's ending up, but like she knows she can always come to this shelter and place to land for safety. And
You can't be the fire and hold space for the fire at the same time.
yeah, I think when you're dealing with, and I don't know in your experience, but like in my masculine, I was in my masculine because there was a lot of feminine energy coming my way from my husband, like insecurity on multiple levels. So there was no container for me to feel safe enough to really like flourish and grow my flames and grow my fire because I was responsible for managing his emotions and his experience and I think we talked about like the mother-child dynamic that can show up a lot in marriages, but your experience was more of like this sibling dynamic.
We
It
had
was like
both, yeah.
constantly. Yeah. And, I think there's also the point that we talked about as far as like the work that we're doing and the experience that we're doing when we're facing a partner and mirroring back to each other of like, damn, this is a really fucking hard spot for us. Like, how are you taking care of yourself?
Yeah.
But you're the only one who has those tools. It also puts you in this like teacher position, which I think is like an immediate turnoff to any kind of, sexual energy whatsoever.
The mentor-mentee kind of relationship dynamic is not a great one. One thing go ahead.
It's just one of these things that we say, like, I'm not interested in getting into the pattern of raising men up or educating or evolving men. And some people who really are in that pattern. But
Validatrix. We have a friend who does.
Well, she's not in that pattern in her life.
That's true.
But it is really funny.
She found quite the niche for it.
Yeah, I mean, to stick up for men, though, here's the interesting thing that to me, I go, there are plenty of men, who
100%.
1000% will climb the mountain to build the fire. But and this is what I always push back against. But I go, to me, the core needs, you're a human before you're masculine or feminine. The core needs of everybody is safety and security. Then comes acceptance and belonging. Then comes freedom and autonomy. There does come a place in my story where if I'm doing that, I need to sit by the fire at some point as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is part of the thing that I think men need to realize within themselves, and male partners of men need to understand. Men do not feel safe as well.
Yeah.
So there's a real safety deficit with humans in general because we all suffer. And so to me, it's really funny because I don't know if you guys know, what's his name? Anyway, there's this book that I was reading with a friend of mine, a guy friend of mine, and the guy in the book was going through some really financial difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife said to him, the guy said to the wife, he said, listen, you should leave me. Like, I'm like a sinking ship. Like, you really should get out while you can. Actually, they were not yet married.
Yeah.
And she looked at him and said, baby, I will live with you under a bridge. We can do this. And this made my friend break down into tears. And so from my perspective, this is what men need, because what we don't trust is that we're based only on outcomes, right? Like, there's even a theme going on right now. So you got to be 6 feet, 6 inches size at 6 figures.
Yeah.
And this is how men are judged, as outcome, right? So we're judged in an outcome based way. And to me, I go, we should be worthy just because. Every human.
Absolutely.
Worthy just because, and held in that place. And so I do think that the reason men oftentimes don't step fully in is because they don't trust that you are going to be there and sleep with them under the bridge, right? And honestly, I think we just have to look at our capacity. I think most women wouldn't, and maybe they shouldn't, but this is just the reality of the situation, right? So I'm not saying everyone has to make those decisions, but I do think there's a lot of men who will go to the ends of the earth for their women. But I do think they're in the back of their minds, those men go, if I'm not actually producing anything, you actually don't see any value in me. You don't see value in me as a man. What you see is what I can produce. And that also, just like women have gone through their evolution of like, we don't want to be subservient to men and we want to have a voice. Men are going through their evolution too, and essentially going, I'm not going to, put out and be judged based on outcomes. I'm more than what I produce. I'm more than my height. I'm more than my income. I'm more than my penis size. And I do think men are rebelling from that as well. So as women are having their sort of balancing pendulum swinging back and forth, so are men. And for us, just my final thing on this, me being a single man too, I just go, I don't need nor want someone who's going to judge me on any of those things, because I'm good.
Sure.
Right? Like I'm good in myself. Like, you better show up and be like, you're worthy because, and that's an important thing that I think men are struggling with. So just to throw the male side into
I love that. Yeah. I that brings up a lot for me. And I really like to talk about my experience because I can only relate to that. Right. And I think there's a whole gamut out there of opinion and experience, but I definitely relate to that in my first marriage. And then I think I also see it from the peripherals of other relationships in my life as well. I think it's what men like seek and is so important as far as like no matter what I look like or what comes of me or how much money is in my bank account, you're gonna be that how I was talking about it the other day, like that down ass bitch, like my who's gonna be my old lady and just there to ride with me through it all, no matter what.
Yeah.
So in my experience with my husband, he kind of threw a curveball at me because previously I had only really been dating for like, people who were super out there, fairly affluent in their out there-ness. And here comes this landscaper who's running his family landscape business, drives like an old beater truck. And I just looked at him and I was like, you're the salt of the earth, and I fell in love with him for his heart for sure. And that was something that I always praised him for and really tried to focus on. Like, you've got such a good heart. The story that I told myself was no matter what, this man will be a great father and provider, and, we'll be able to make anything work between the two of us. Our dreams had aligned very much. And my mom describes him as like, he can skin a bear and build a barn kind of guy. So in my feminine experience, which I was really in my masculine in the marriage. But this is, I also acknowledge as a pattern because ultimately he turned out to be an alcoholic. And in my relationship history, having always chose that, I had to choose myself and walk away because I was watching a drowning ship that I could not save, no matter how hard I tried. And damn, did I just so wanted to be that down ass bitch that they would change for, and they couldn't. And so it's like I have had to choose to flame my own fire, but I would have loved to have sat sat and shared in that with someone for sure. Like in my marriage, he got his third DUI when we were married. I had to go pick him up from jail. And I picked him up at 1 a.m. while our toddler was sleeping. And I said, you can do this. Here's your opportunity. And I'm right by your side. And I can remember early on in our relationship with the alcoholism, making threats of like, maybe I can't do this. And I saw how crushing that was for him. Like what he really wanted is to hear, I will never leave you. And it's heartbreaking to me, honestly, that I couldn't do that.
That's what every human wants.
Right?
I would say every human wants to hear that. And yet every human must be challenged to the point where they have the strength to take care of themselves. And only those humans, this is the ironic thing, only those humans make great partners. I know that's harsh, and maybe I'm wrong about that, but it's only the humans who have been forced to be like, I have to take care of myself. There's a part of me that has to do the job up to a basic level of taking care of myself. And then once I can do that, then I can actually show up for someone else. And so that's where we go to that mentor-mentee kind of thing. Like you have to, kind of look at that and go, all right, am I really down for this? Because that's a lot of work. And I just figured out how to take care of myself. And I do think that's what these struggles are about. They're the opportunities to learn to be our own support system. And the ironic thing and hard thing about being a human is you never actually can do it all yourself. That's the nature of being human. But you do have to get yourself, I think, to a point.
Yeah. It's sort of like alcoholism. It's like within yourself, there is a rock bottom. There is a place that you have to get to. And some people, when they get to that place, will choose, okay, this is it. I'm ready to step up. I'm ready to do the work. I'm ready to set out on this journey to understand these are my wounds. This is what's happening. These are my patterns, and figuring out and starting the path of how do I heal? And, I think what that goes to what you're speaking to, Jade.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there is self-awareness, right? So it's like when it comes to self-awareness, this is the hard thing of relationships, and like basically being like, unfortunately, we don't want to hear this, but we get what we tolerate. We get the patterns that we tolerate, and we don't necessarily know that it takes self-awareness to spot that within ourselves and others.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it's something that we have to pay close attention to. Like the way I see it is we all have, when I evaluate, individuals for romantic connection, I go 4 jobs, right? Health and fitness, finance, purpose, and personal relationships.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to do all of those.
Yeah.
Meaning that what is your relationship with your mom like, your siblings like, your dad like your ex is like, what is it that you're doing? What is your work in the world? Can you pay your rent?
Yeah.
Do you take decent care of your body? Like, I do think everyone has to reach a standard level in those 4 jobs for a partner to be like, okay, like they've got themselves pretty much taken care of. Maybe I can do something here.
Yeah. And I think it's hard to say, right? I mean, it's a bit of a wild card, I think, when it comes down to like, are you going to be someone who chooses to grow?
Yes.
And, when you guys are in the dynamic and like the rock bottom together, and there's no guarantee that you'll grow in the right direction.
No, there's not.
And so my mom always talked to me about that, is you want to be aware of, how people's patterns and the tools that they have, their awareness of those patterns, but the tools that they have. And I think it's tricky in love because, some things outweigh the others when you're in that first 6 months or a year pattern time frame. Their tools may be completely different than yours, and it might lead them into a totally different place.
And that's the thing about managing partners. We can't manage partners. They have, when you are at that rock bottom place, they have to authentically 100% within themselves desire the growth, desire the expansion, and want to walk that path with you together, or else there's no compatibility.
Yeah. And I would say for me, like, I just want someone who's passionate about walking their path.
Yeah.
And then I do think that it's a constant and consistent choice of, I want to walk next to you. We don't have to have the same path.
Yeah.
But I'm fucking walking on mine.
Yeah.
And like, there's a lot of honor
And we're
in
both
that.
dedicated to that journey. And we know that those 2 journeys, they obviously impact our journey together.
And I think it just expands our capacity for acceptance, right? Like, your struggles are different than mine. Your father wound is different than my mother wound. But like, if I see you doing the work, I have a greater capacity and acceptance for all the fucking bullshit that I probably have to put up with because of it.
Yeah. And to me, that's what we're talking about now, is the heart of relationship. That's what we think is, oh, like, I want a partner who's going to be fun and hot and really good sex, and we get to travel and we get to do all this stuff. We think that's intimacy. Yeah. And I go, no, true intimacy is like, I see your wound, and honestly, I want to help you break that pattern. I want to be in that wound with you, and I will let you into mine. That's when true magic begins to happen. And most people don't even get there. Here's the interesting thing. They don't get there till 3 to 5 years in a relationship. And then when they confront it, they're like, you know what? On second thought, I don't want any part of that. Just give me the fun, the sex, the travel, and I go, that's what people don't, all of us have been in long-term, sort of relationships. So we kind of get this, but now we have this situation where a lot of people don't even understand. Like, to me, I get excited about your wound, right? Yeah. I get excited about, I get to be invited into that place, that mess.
Yeah.
And that to me is where the magic happens. And that's a whole different level that most people just cannot deal with because they haven't even dealt with it themselves.
Yeah.
And I would challenge you a little bit, Jade, because I heard you say, like, my job is to be in that wound with you and help you heal. But I think, which is part of your story, but like, you actually, what I believe is like, you actually have the exact, not same wound, but there's wounding within you where you guys are going to mirror that to each other no matter what.
100%.
And it's like, am I willing to be open and vulnerable and aware of my wound because it's being reflected right back to me from yours?
Yeah. And the truth, the real answer to that, and this is the hard part, is I don't know, but I'm going to see with you, right? I don't know. I may be too scared. You might be not willing. I don't know. But that's the jump. That's real intimacy. That's real vulnerability. Because guess what? I don't know if I can. Yeah. And I don't know if you will. Yeah. But I'm willing to step into that.
That is so attractive to me, that energy, because I feel like not only is, I don't know, like humility, which I was telling you guys is one of the most attractive qualities to me, but it allows for like this unfolding and this expansion. And it feels almost like flirty, you know, like we're going to do this dance and we're going to do it for a while. And like, it's going to change and shift. It's not like I got you no matter what. Like you can gain 60 pounds and never leave
you don't know
the house, and you know, and
you
it's
don't
just like,
know.
yep, that's my wife over there. You know, like,
and by the way, I enter into stuff like that where I just go, I know it's really nice that you say that. It's real. I love that you're saying that. It's a nice thought, but you have no idea.
Exactly.
you actually don't
and
know.
also like, you know, for me, okay, well, you're an extreme alcoholic. I didn't see that one coming. Mm-hmm. Like, and you've done these things to put my safety at danger. You know, there's concern there. Like, yeah, I can't keep saying, baby, no matter what, I'm going to be there for you. It's like, yeah, this is very triggering for me. And I feel like I got to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. And maybe this will be the final thing. I want to see what you think about this, but maybe we can wrap up with this particular piece. To me, I go, the willingness part, right? Yeah. It's like that right there. To me, I go, yes, that's where it's actually a challenge. I guess I would say all relationships end regardless, right? Because this isn't the fucking Notebook. We're not going to die together holding hands. All relationships eventually, maybe we could, but all relationships eventually end. And I do think and this is the part that I'll be interested in your take on this, because this is the part where I go, okay, like honestly, you may need to end this or have it be ended for you to actually clear the wound. Like sometimes to clear the wound and to get the lesson and to break the pattern, the relationship must end. Sometimes you can't go to your next level with your current partner.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's exactly what we're talking about here in both of our experiences. And back to what you were saying, Erin, I think it's really, that's it. The alcoholic. Okay. You had your third DUI. Here we are. All right. Now, are you broken down enough to really get to that vulnerable place where you say, what is going on with me? What is happening? I want to understand more about what is the wound within myself right now that's causing these things to happen. How can I begin the process of healing? And some people never get there, whatever the wound is. Mm-hmm. And it's about like their own perspective of themselves and their own curiosity and their willingness and drive to evolve and change and grow and expand.
So I'm curious about something. If we look at like this masculine, I guess we could call it the wound, but which is like, I got you as a feminine coming in. Like, I choose you. I got you. I'm your down ass bitch. Like, what about this I don't know energy, like bringing that in and how that affects the level of security in the relationship? Because we can't guarantee, right? Mm-hmm. We don't know what's going to happen. And I love the I don't know, but we're going to kind of figure it out. Mm-hmm. But how can you provide security to the masculine within that?
You don't get to do it all at once.
Yeah.
It happens. Sure. It happens slowly over time. And I think, for a man, you know, if we want to equate masculine and male, you know, like when we say for that energy, I think there is the need to just basically be like, you know what? I see that you're doing the best you can, and I see that you're failing, I guess, right? But you can't. That's what men are sensitive to. Like it's the outcome. It's like when I produce an outcome, if you're just like over there in the corner judging every outcome. And by the way, it's small outcomes. It's everything from, did I pick up this? Did I do this right? A man goes, at some point, a man just goes, okay, I see now what you want is you treat me as an outcome generator. Mm. That's all you care about. Outcome generator. Can you fix the thing? Can you do this? Sure. Can you all the things like, and it's measured against the culture level thing, outcome. And the guy just goes, okay, so I see I'm an outcome generator to you. I'm actually not a human that you really want to like sit in spaces with and be vulnerable with, that's how you show up. You just stop seeing them as an outcome generator and you see them as a human, not a male who has, just has to produce these outcomes for me. But this is my friend. This is my partner. This is someone who I want to grow with. And guess what? You're going to mess up. And like anything, what we forget is we parent our romantic partners and we parent them and you need to parent them well. And what would a parent do if someone messed up?
Yeah.
Hey, it's okay. We all mess up. Let's try again.
Yeah.
Now, at some point, a parent would also hold that child to a standard. So to me, it's like, you don't start out holding them to a standard. You start out, being like, I love you for who you are. And then eventually you kind of go, hey, if this is now infringing on my fire, that's a problem. But seeing men as an outcome generator is going to make you not have a successful relationship.
I don't know that has been my experience. Maybe when I was much, much younger. But I mean, the thing that's coming to me when I'm hearing you talk, Jade, is like the classical story of, oh my God, I've experienced it so many times.
Me too.
Like, okay, guess what? I unloaded the dishwasher. Are you going to give me praise? Are you going to give me praise? Like, look what I did. And I took out the trash, and almost wanting like this affirmation and praise based off of their own desire for affirmation, for outcome producing. While on the other hand, I felt, and a lot of times I've felt in my adult relationships, like I am, when there's an issue, the one who's going and, okay, come back down. Come sit next to me at the fire. Let's talk about what's going on. Let's like figure out what is the wound, what's coming up for you. And so that what you're talking about hasn't been my experience. So I have a hard time relating to that in my last.
And if I may, and you two can go off on me about this, what I would say is this is about choice.
Yeah.
Like, gosh, I hope this doesn't come across in a harsh way, but like to me, I mean, there are little boys and there are teenagers and there are men.
Yeah.
And by the way, and those live in all of us. And ultimately, if you choose and you confront and you're dealing with little boys or teenage boys, and you can see what that's like. The little boy is like, praise me, I need you, I need you, I need you. The teenage boy is like needy, leaky energy with women. You'll see these patterns. And then I just go, and I hate to say this, but those are choices that, if you spot them, you can avoid that.
Sure. But here's the thing, like, if we're going back to traditional societal values and traditional marriage, the traditional way, even now as the age bracket has moved, is getting married in your 30s. Well, guess what? There is no 30-year-old man or 30-year-old woman who's completely worked through all their little boy, little girl wounds whatsoever. So with this mindset, which partnership is there for, it's basically what I'm, where I'm at in that. Okay, well, maybe it is to step into a marriage and a relationship and a life partnership. I'm not interested in entertaining any man that's under like 47 years old, because there's a certain amount of man that I want to select and not a lot of little boy that I want to entertain at this level where I'm at with my little girl and my adult self.
Yeah, I think that's I told my niece, I said, don't get with someone, don't ever marry a man who's under 40. Like, that's not a good idea. However, what I see is, and this is unfortunate, but I see 50-year-old fuck boys everywhere. Because, so to me, I go, and those are the worst, and those are the worst types. 50 years old still doing that.
Dinner next to at the oh my God, he was a 7-year-old fuck boy. But in that, I've also experienced a lot of men who are a byproduct of getting married really young because they had kids young, and then they end up divorced, and then they're in this like midlife, late life, whatever crisis of sowing all the oats that they never got to when they were in their 20s and 30s.
I mean, like, to me, we talk about this a lot. I look at it as like, it's models, right? The model has been, and it's a wrong model. And I know you two may not love this, and maybe a lot of people listening don't. The model of you complete me is an absolutely wrong, dysfunctional model. The right model is you grow me. That is the correct model. And so if you're operating from a you complete me model, you will continue to either be in relationships where you are not happy, or those relationships will dissolve. Versus if you go, I'm stepping into relationships where we are going to grow each other. And by the way, I'm not going to be a self-centered person who's just like, you need to grow me and fulfill all my needs. We're going to grow each other.
Yeah.
And what that means for society, and this is where everyone I think is not going to like me very much, but what that means for society is that more relationships are going to break up, right? And so, and that's, I think that's where the evolution is. I also think there'll be much happier relationships, because let's look at the statistics. 50% divorce rates, I think it's 51, and 60% of those remaining marriages are classified as unhappy based on some statistics. So what I think is going to happen is more relationships will perhaps break up when you embrace a you grow me model, but each relationship makes you a better person. So the relationships remaining will be much happier, much more fulfilled relationships.
Well, I think that segues into a lot of stuff, but I think two things that came up for me is like, going into the marriage and having this kind of idea of what's selfless and my role, but also this, what sounded really good in my marriage vows around unconditional love. Is also like just not reality, but it's the evolution of self to find unconditional love within.
Unconditional love is martyrdom in a sense. It's not, it's not smart. We don't question these ideas. Unconditional love. So, okay, so someone beats you up and you're going to unconditional, like, no, like that's just a no.
And then you come to the question, if we're talking about marriage and marital values, family values, okay, where do you draw the line? And for me, it is, do you grow me? Are we growing together?
But also, can I be a happy, content, fulfilled person, individual in this dynamic so I can raise my child?
Exactly. If there are children, I think it becomes easier, especially for women, if there are children involved, to say, okay, does my unhappiness severely impact my child and their wounding and their development in their life?
And yes, it does. Based on the research, it absolutely does. The emotional status of the parents is what determines not the public, sort of arrangement of the parents, but the emotional status of the parents is what determines the health of that particular child. And I think the model needs to change, because what we do is we have, the male, the female, and then we have the relationship dynamic. So there's three entities in every relationship. And so what happens, what most people do is they go, well, now I'm going to focus on this relationship dynamic. I am no longer me. I am now you/me. And that creates all the problem, because relationships need to maintain the you and the me. And then there has to be this third dynamic. And by the way, when a kid comes along, now there's a fourth dynamic, because what people will do is they'll pull all the energy out of the coupleship and now try to include the kid in that. And that needs to be a separate dynamic. And so again, part of it is we just have not educated ourselves in these ways of being. Now it's you, me, you and me, and now me and the kid, and you and the kid, and then me, you, and the kid. These dynamics, and you have to now manage those separately. And this goes back to what we're talking about women, where women are much more aware and in tune with these dynamics than perhaps a male will be. But I think it's a huge mistake to all of a sudden, and a lot of people do this, go, okay, now the family unit, and men do have to be patient with this, because there is a time where a woman is going to have to pull her energy out of you to be in with the child. And you're going to have to be the person who is climbing a mountain, building the fire at that point. And I think that men have to get ready for that. And that's a responsibility that I do think, and there are just certain things, traditional values, that has to happen. Otherwise there's some real issues there. So your energy has, as a man, when you step into that. And by the way, just so everyone knows, I don't have children, but I have worked with many women who have children. So take this with a grain of salt. But from my perspective, you have got to then step up and be like, now I am out on the plains patrolling. There's no one there. I don't get an acknowledgement, reciprocation, whatever, because right now, for this period of time, we've got to take care of this child, and that's my role. And the woman has to do her role. And so those we just don't talk about those dynamics.
And women can't teach that.
No, they cannot.
And this topic, we could talk about for 6 hours. I have a 2-year-old son, so I just went through this in my marriage and my relationship, and ultimately, to date, we have not survived. And I went into that relationship dynamic trying to do a very modern, autonomous, I do my work, I provide for me, you do your work, he provides for himself. But then when I became a mother and I stepped into the postpartum, even though I trailblazed all through my pregnancy and continued to be a badass, like boss bitch, there was a moment where no matter how strong I was, there's a biological thing happening in my body where my hormones and everything was shifted. And I was thrust into the traditional female positioning in a relationship dynamic where I have to be vulnerable and there's literally nothing I can do about it. And I need you, my partner, to take care of us, cultivate safety, hold this container, provide for us so that I can be here in this vulnerable space with my baby.
Talk about expectation of output, which I kind of wanted to push back on you on for females.
At that point, at that point, it's all outcome.
And we have a whole other riff.
But also, like, we're expected to grow a child in our body, give birth to it, and then not only take care of it, but physically, what do you think a man wants from his wife after childbirth?
They want to have sex.
Yeah.
Like, is it 6 weeks yet?
And you know what?
Put my dick in?
Yeah, I'm glad you're pushing back on that because I would expand that. I don't think that's unique to men. I think what we do, and I tell my male friends this all the time, where they're like, women only want, a man with money and power. And I go, yeah, and all you want is a tits and ass and a woman to and I said, and these are very 20-year-old dynamics. I'm like, why are you treating the woman in your life when you're 30, 40, 50 years old as if they're a 20-year-old woman?
Yeah.
Why are women, and this is what we do, by the way, to me, this is a whole other conversation we can have. We should start ending this one because it's getting long, but there's a whole other conversation topic we should have is that what the problem is women treating men as if they're 20-year-old men.
Right.
And men treating women as if they're 20-year-old women. No, we're grown adults, we're more mature. We need to treat each other that way. But I think, I don't know if you have any final things you all want to wrap up with this one, but I enjoyed this a lot.
Good. Yeah. It's a good one.
It's my life's work, all of this.
Well, at least this phase of our lives, it's become much more, prevalent, and there's a lot of lessons there. And I'm definitely of the belief system that, that masculine and feminine exists within all. Yeah, that energy exists within all individuals and dynamics, and it's an interchange and can be a really beautiful dance. And I think, looking at it, talking about it, acknowledging, the wounding of it is really helpful in understanding how we show up in relationships. So it's important, and it's not so black and white like most things.
How about you, Kevin?
Funky black and white. I hate the gray, but I love the gray.
Yeah.
But I
gotta learn to live in the gray.
Yeah. It's just a color, from the artist's perspective. Yes, 100%. I think it's about the balance of masculine and feminine within ourselves. And I think that's a lot of the issues of what we're seeing in social media and the conversations and these swinging from one side to the other trap where wife versus this like
toxic masculine.
Yeah. Because when someone's projecting that kind of story, it's because they're masculine and feminine within themselves is out of balance. Like they can't accept their feminine if they're desiring to show up in this major way. That's masculine. And wanting to be accepted for that.
Yeah, and Matt, love that so much. I think I'll just leave it there. It's brilliantly said. So, ditto.